Welcome back to the Pro Series Podcast. This is episode 149, and today's guest is Colleen Bennett. Colleen is an interior designer. She is the owner of CBB Designs firms and Mimosa Home. We talk about her really long career, her very successful career of repping lines, being a designer, moving all over the world to do so. It's such a cool and interesting story that she tells in a side of the business that I've never really heard of. So it's a really cool episode if you're in the interior design space or just kind of a rep or sales. It's such a cool story that she has here. But before we get into this episode, please like, subscribe, and review this podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts. And now I hope you enjoy episode 149 with Colleen Bennett. Well, Colleen, thank you so much for hopping on the Pro Series Podcast. So excited to talk to you about design, your business, and just do a cool conversation with design.
Cool. Eric, thanks so much for having me here. We look forward to having conversation with you and, getting to know one another and talking about our life's journeys.
Yeah. And I can't wait because you were telling me a little bit about yourself in the pre-call before we started recording. And I always try not to ask too many questions because I want it to become in the recording itself and let people hear it. But I'm so interested in hearing how you started your career and how you got to where you are, and then some of the in between there, just to kind of inspire other people that maybe they are feeling stuck. They're a designer, or maybe they're a rep and they feel stuck and they want to do something else, but they don't know that career path. They don't know how else to get there. I mean, I feel like everybody has their own career path and everybody has their other way to do it, but it's also nice to hear other people's journeys to see how it is possible and that they're not stuck in their
Sure.
life.
Sure. So I think I got a lot of my stuff from that Richard Branson School of Business, which is say yes and figure it out later. Like,
Okay.
okay, this sounds awesome. How do I do this? So I was actually an Army brat. My dad was in the military as an Army doctor, and I probably moved 15, 16 different times
Wow.
around the United States, which allowed me to then be able to meet people really easily, pick up and move, pack, which you'll see how that comes down later when you do your own shipping company, learning how to put things in small spaces. And what ended up happening was with doing a lot of moving and meeting so many different people, I really wanted to be in the international world is where I really globally wanted to be. And I ended up at Wake Forest University, which is North Carolina.
Yeah.
Because I had traveled so much and had been different. So I lived in Texas, Colorado, New York, you name it, different schools, I ended up as a junior in college coming in as a freshman. So I basically told my parents, I'm staying for 4 years. So I'm not leaving. I want to be here. I want to be able to, have the college experience, but I'm going to push myself. So I actually triple majored in politics, history, and Spanish, which
Wow.
didn't really help you out in the scheme of life when becoming a lawyer, right? Because that's what I wanted to be. But,
Okay.
took the LSAT, saw how law was going, was like, no. And ended up, my resume was sent to Drexel Heritage right after that. So it was interesting because I have no idea in furniture. I mean, I always thought it was pretty, that's great. I could put a room together really well, but I had no idea about furniture construction or how to sell furniture. But when I was offered, we will pay for you to travel around the world on our dime and you sell furniture, I said to Richard Branson, yes, we will figure this out. And ended up in a factory for literally a month building my own piece of furniture. So I learned all the ins and outs of how to do upholstery, how to do case goods. And then because I spoke fluent Spanish, I was able to they would send me off. My first place was Panama. So my first place, I land in Panama, and there's the Panama Canal. And I'm getting to meet all the cool who's who of Panama because they introduced me. This is our rep from Drexel Heritage, and she's a designer. And I'm going, oh dear Lord. Excuse me. And they're like, yeah, no, I need you to just put this together. So you learn, right? You sit there and you're organically understanding. So I walk into this store in Panama and everything is gray. I'm going, and velvet. So Panama, as you know,
Mm.
is super hot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever wanted to sit on a sofa that's made out of velvet where they don't really use air
No,
conditioning?
no.
Yeah, she was wondering why her stuff didn't sell. I was like, well, I can tell you real quickly, I wouldn't buy a velvet sofa in Panama. And that was what the previous rep had done. They had just sold what was ever there and they didn't really listen to their client. So when I understood that, like, hey, Panama is colorful, loves patterns, must use linen, can't use nail trim, has a lot of maids, because there you have maids and cooks and chefs. You can't have skirts on the sofas because when they're cleaning, they'll use Clorox bleach and bleach your sofas. So when you start to learn
Mm.
your client and you do this in 68 other countries, so like my job was half the world in Russia. So I went everywhere. It was really cool. I got to learn how different religions use furniture. I got to use, certain things are not appropriate in certain countries. So certain colors are considered, like if you're in China, red is a great color to use because it's lucky, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the color of death. Please don't use white on, those type of things where you're learning how to put fabric to frame, right? But when I did this journey with Drexel Heritage, I ended up doing over about 100 stores. And so when you're at Furniture Market, you're having to create spaces. So I organically learned how to do interior design that way. It
Okay.
was, how do I make these furniture pieces go from Morganton, North Carolina to Sydney, Australia, get there in one piece, land delivered with no issues, right?
Mm.
So as I'm doing that, my husband and I, he was at MBA school. We decided after I've been traveling for 2 years that because I speak Spanish, I'm probably not the best of use in Southeast Asia or Russia or Thailand. So we actually moved to Costa Rica. Drexel Heritage moved there,
Oh.
which was really cool. So when we were there, they were like, look, you should open a store. The store that was down there went kaput. And I'm like, isn't that kind of conflict of interest being a sales rep and having your own store? They're like, well, you need to make up the numbers. So
Mm.
what I ended up doing is opening my first store with $6,000 and 150 grand in debt. So there you go. You're going, oh
Wow.
gosh, I have to invest in this stuff. Across from a chicken, a donkey, and a turkey, because that's all we could afford. So you'd be on the phone call with clients, you'd hear like, "Bagam, chicken." You're like, oh my God. And we literally did about 18 containers worth of product, because what we did was we would buy everything and sell it at US price points, landed and delivered in a third world country. Well, third world countries have tariffs that are 40 to 50% higher than ours.
Mm-hmm.
We cut our margin. And so basically we became like the Amazon. We didn't have any inventory. We just basically showed them online. This is what it looks like. This is what we can do. Here's the fabric samples. And people are like, no one will ever do that. Okay, now look at Wayfair and Amazon. It's happening. But we did this 20 years ago. So we were 23 and 24 years old. And we did the head of the beer company down there, his house. We did a huge lawyer's house. I mean, so we started becoming super connected within the Latin American community. And then companies like Korean Company or EJ Victor would call us and be like, I'm sorry, what is happening in Costa Rica? You've ordered more product than anybody has ordered ever. And when we told them our story, they hired us as reps. So we ended up picking up a brand portfolio.
Yeah.
So we were basically the reps, my husband and I, for Latin America. And then we picked up back Australia. My Australians were like, we're not leaving her. She's got to stay. So we had that. And then my Southeast Asian clients were like, nope, we're keeping her too. And so it kind of like rebuilt back my portfolio of countries, but we were still out of Costa Rica, which was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when, you sit there and you're going, well, if we can do this in Costa Rica, why can't we do this someplace else? So we went to Nicaragua, which was like, there was nobody. There was like a few stores, but no one did interior design. So we blew it out of the water. We did the vice president's house. We can't name names, but we've done their houses too. We've done, we've brought in chandeliers that were bigger than the National Theater into people's houses that we custom designed. It was really cool. And then, from there, we opened in Honduras and Ecuador same year. And while we were opening Honduras, they had a change of government. So we opened the day the government changed. So we had to lock down the entire store. So that was fun. But in the middle of this, my husband and I are having a family. Every time we're having a new store, I'm pregnant for some reason or other. It just kind of happened. And after a while of being in Latin America, we were like, you know what? I really want to go back to the States. But in the middle of all of this, we get a phone call from Ralph Lauren to represent Ralph Lauren Home. So we represented a huge corporation, Ralph Lauren Home, we ended up getting all of Asia, all of Latin America, all of Australia. So there we are out of Costa Rica. I'm dealing with big corporate. I'm dealing with design. Our business has grown to like probably 40 women. It was all women.
Wow. Okay.
Which was really cool because
That is cool.
It's a very male dominated culture. So to have women businesses, women run, and we still are, we're celebrating almost 20 years in Costa Rica, which is really cool.
That is awesome. Congrats.
So in the middle of doing all that, like I was talking about how I had to figure out how to move stuff, we started our own shipping company. So we started our own shipping company because my husband's flying back, putting all of our furniture into containers, because every time we would send it to a freight forwarder, it would come busted. So we brought it from like 12% damage down to 0.02%. So then my clients are like, well, who's shipping for you? And I was like, well, I'm shipping. So then they hired us. So then we have a shipping company now that's shipping to Australia and other parts of the world. We were doing like 90 containers a year, including our own stores, which was nuts. And then, my husband got hired to be CEO of a company. We came back and everything was good. We had our second daughter, and she ended up with the rarest form of epilepsy in the world. So like there you are being a mom, an entrepreneur, and then you're in the hospital for 200 days trying to figure out how to maneuver all of this stuff, right? And you're just going, how do you handle all of this? How do you handle, it was crazy, but you're sitting in the hospital, making sure people are getting their stuff, taking phone calls from clients. And then it just got to the point, and then COVID hits, and it's just like, there had to be a change. So I really started getting away from rep business, and I have my whole team of reps. So I have a director of sales that I had to hire. So they're still doing that, which is great. And we still have a fabulous brand portfolio. But then I went into doing interior design in the States. So I had only taken clients kind of selectively. And of course, I decided to do this the day the world crashes.
Of course.
Seeing a theme here?
Yep.
Yep. And my husband had built a hotel and was working on breweries. I mean, he's very much an entrepreneur, which is kind of cool. And we do all this, and COVID happens. So you're watching the hotel close down. We decided not to do Ralph Lauren anymore. And then I'm going, I'll open an interior design business with, 2 or 3 clients. Well, I had no idea that was going to be, COVID would be the year of interior design. So I take from 2 to 3 clients to 150 in 2 to 3 years. It was crazy.
That is insane.
Yeah. So now I have a 23,000 square foot showroom we do our own kitchens, our own finishes. We buy everything at wholesale and sell to our clients at 35% above when they hire us as interior designers. So they get a huge, big savings because we're continuing this Amazon concept, but at the higher end level. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
That's incredible.
I'm a mom with 3 girls and a wife, and I do entrepreneur, and I have failed miserably. I think that's my biggest thing, as I tell people. I have failed on so many different businesses. I've tried wedding stuff in Costa Rica. That failed. We tried, oh my gosh, garbage cans in San Jose because they didn't have garbage cans. That failed. Like you would learn. We've tried everything. I feel like I think my thing is like the Richard Branson, I'll say yes, I'll figure it out. And if I don't, well, check box.
Yeah, just move on to the next thing.
So that's kind of been, my little journey in a nutshell, which sounds
incredible.
really, really weird and all over the place. But
No,
Yeah, we
that's what
did.
I love about this podcast. I get to hear these incredible stories, and it's also nice to hear you would kind of admit that you there were some failed businesses there. Because some people they'll do that one business and they fail, and then they give up and they just kind of go to that comfort job or back to the corporate world or whatever that is, to kind of just be comfortable to get a living. But you kind of persevered and just kept going with it and just kept going with whatever was that next pathway for you, and you kind of just took it on.
Yeah, well, I think you have to have faith sometimes, and I think your
Mm,
can be very, tested. So
yeah.
like Nicaragua in 2018 had a revolution and they killed mothers on May 30th, 2018. They were protesting because they stole all the social security from the people in Nicaragua. And so our store went on lockdown. My business partner, her parents, they stood up against the Nicaraguan government and then they were persecuted. So we lost everything overnight.
Wow.
I had
Holy
orders I
crap.
had to pay. I had overnight, there was nothing coming back. Bank shut down. Oh, yeah. Just gave birth to my daughter. And I'm sitting there going, how much money do I have to pay tomorrow? Okay, I'll figure it out. I mean, and then we had to close down. So then you're sitting there going, I could go bankrupt from this. That's a
Yeah.
house we just lost. A
Oh
house.
yeah.
I mean, I worked my tail off. I just said, okay, well, I'm going to make sure that I'll create a payment plan. I'll do all this stuff. But there were parts of the time where I just wanted to hang it up and just be like, but then I was like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to do that with this much money outstanding? And you just have to say, well, I need to get more clients and I need to get this done and I need to pay that. And, you just dig deep. I think
Yeah.
you have to, you can't sit there and wallow in it because it'll consume you. It was really tough, let me tell you. I mean, there were times where I just sat there in the rocker with my daughter going, make this stop. This has to stop.
Oh
This
yeah.
can't get any worse. And then the minute I would say that, it would just be like, boom. So it just you had to change your mindset. I find that my mindset kind of helps me get through that. But that was a
Yeah.
huge fail. That was a massive fail. That was a
How did
scary fail.
Oh, I
But
bet.
oh yeah.
How'd you go about growing in another company or in another country where you really don't have the connections that you have in like your hometown or wherever your comfort location is? Like, how did you do that?
So basically, like Costa Rica, I had originally a connection and then that dissipated. But really, it was getting out there and meeting people,
Mm-hmm.
meeting the designers and saying, hey, we can help you. This is what we do. Um, getting out in the community, making sure that I was at events and doing that stuff. And then I would just kind of network that way.
Gotcha.
And when I got into these other countries, it's because we were so successful in Costa Rica. A designer who was a friend of ours passed us a connection in Nicaragua. They came,
Mhm.
interviewed with us, and then we were interviewing them. And it was kind of like you got to slowly meet people. We made business partners. And that was our key thing, was making sure that our business partners were just as vested as we were, because obviously we're not going to be there. Do you know what I mean? We
Yeah.
made sure that we paid them well. We made sure that, they got a percentage of sales. It wasn't just, hey, this is my business. This was, we're going to grow together. And when we did that, we were able to get in. And because those people were connected, then they connected us with the clients and what have you. So it was just, we would go in and do, all right, you set up 15 meetings with the top architects, top designers, the top clients, and we're going to spend 2 to 3 days and we're just going to hit it. And we would do it without even having a store, and we would walk away with sales. It
Yeah.
was, and then it'd be
Jeez.
like, okay, well, now we can set up a store. Now we can do this. It was basically making sure our whole game plan was not using having any overhead, right? So
Yeah.
like per sale paid for everything. And so it was always, for some reason, it would always work out. We would get a massive house the first sale. So like the first sale in Nicaragua was like, ooh, 1,500 square meters, so 15,000 square feet. So like that was a big house that we
Yeah.
did first go around. Same thing happened in Ecuador. Same thing happened in Honduras. It was just kind of like how it was. You would go and you'd meet the who's who, and then they'd see your portfolio. And because Latin America is so small, they'd call their friends and be like, do you know this lady? I'm like, yeah, actually I do. That's just because society down there is a lot smaller. So you
Hmm.
think our 1 to 10% is small. The 1 to 10% down there is
Even
very,
smaller.
it's like minute.
Yeah.
But they all know each other. So it
Yeah.
just kind of worked out that way.
It's
Um,
incredible what
it's
networking
crazy.
can do.
Oh, it's all about, I always laughed when someone would be like, it's all about who you know. No, it really is about who you know.
Oh yeah. It's
Yeah.
I always think of networking as like currency. It's like not currency as in like you exchange stuff, but you could collect all these different people in the network, and that's how you build yourself. That's how you build your career.
Well, it's kind of like your, I always don't say Rolodex. I'm like, what's on my iPhone? I mean, I
Yeah.
never delete a number. I still have
Oh,
numbers
I don't
from,
either.
I mean, how many do you have on your phone? I think I've got like 3,000 people.
I
It's like,
honestly I don't think I've ever looked.
have you looked?
I don't think so.
Well, if you take a look at now, I'll see mine. What does mine say? Let's see here. Contacts. I think I'm sitting at, and they've got, I don't know if you have Apple, but they now have like the new one, but mine's showing 2,900, 2,515.
Okay, so I have a
Kind of
little over
crazy.
I have a little over 1,000, but I do have two phones.
Okay.
That's the thing.
But it's weird because like I've never deleted it. And then like 10 years later, I'm like, do you know this person? Like, hold on 1 second. I actually do have their number.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's kind
it's
of,
even that way with social media nowadays.
oh
I'm
yeah.
like, wait, I know who that person is. I think they follow me, or I think I follow them type of deal.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. And I never like unfollow or what have you, which is kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
And I've
It,
had people reach out from like 20 years ago going, hey, I ordered this. Can I still get that? I'm like, I think so. Let me look.
yeah. That's the funny part. I always say how I hear people like that struggle with trying to find a job or struggle with networking and stuff. And I'm like, today we have it as easy as possible. Like it's the easiest thing to network nowadays. Like we have it
Oh,
so easy.
you can
Com
literally DM someone that you don't even know and like
exactly.
they're actually message you back. I tried it the other day. I was like, I'm just gonna see. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I'm like, holy crap, that worked.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Before you'd have to find their phone number and call them or find their address and follow them. But nowadays, like even with this podcast, I'm in Pittsburgh, you're in North Carolina. I probably would never have met you in person because our paths
No,
wouldn't have crossed unless we were at a big trade show or something.
sure.
But because of the power of media and the power of emailing and all this stuff, if you're just willing to reach out to someone, it's the easiest way to connect to someone and it's the easiest way to build connections in other areas.
Oh, I agree. I think the biggest thing, I don't know, maybe if you know this, I think it's fear. I think people are
Oh,
so afraid.
yeah.
Like, I think we're so preconditioned to not fail, right? Like,
Hmm.
you know, ask. You
Yeah.
never know. Like, ask for your Google review. It could be a bad review, but ask for it, you know?
Absolutely. And I think that all stems from how you grew up. If you were always told to not ask questions or something, you're more fearful to reach out to that person and fearing that they're going to say no and not fearing that or not like hoping that they're going to say yes because majority of the people they will at least say something back to you.
Sure.
And if they
Sure.
say no, who cares? You don't know them. You don't live
At
next to
least you
them.
tried, right? At
Yeah.
least you tried. No
Doesn't
one's
matter.
feelings were hurt. Um, But I always find when I have fear, like I personally have fear, and that will happen, like that time in Nicaragua, I find like all this bad stuff will happen, or I won't reach out, or I won't ask for the sale, or I won't do that stuff. And then I
Mhm.
find that my business gets like slows down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, has that ever happened to you? Like
Oh
where
yeah.
you're like, why do I have not have any sales? It's like, well, maybe I should stop being a hermit and
Yeah.
get out there.
Yeah, and I think it all goes off of your mindset too. I really do believe that your mindset controls a lot of your life and your decisions and what comes to you and, career paths or opportunities, customers and stuff. Your energy kind of delivers that and kind of
Oh, 100%. I mean, I definitely think that my mindset and my thoughts are things, that whole connection, like that.
yeah.
And, people want to say manifesting, but I think you manifest.
Oh, I'd believe
I
that too.
I totally 100%. Like I manifested Ralph Lauren. Like the minute I walked in to Drexel, they had partnered with Henredon, which used to be a massive furniture company.
Okay.
Henredon at the time was manufacturing Ralph Lauren. And
Hmm.
like I walked in and there I am. First of all, I'm the only female who's been hired at Drexel Heritage in a really long time to be a rep. And I get there, they're like, who's this secretary? And I'm like, oh, I'm actually a rep. And I'm going, huh. and I see this glamorous, gorgeous Russian lady walk by from Ralph Lauren. I want that. I want that. I want that. I want to be that rep. I want to be for that company. I want that to happen. Now, did it happen right away? No, but it did happen 6 years later. And that Russian beautiful rep is a good friend of mine, and we were working together at Ralph Lauren. So those are things that I totally think you can do. Like,
Yeah.
I want to, I want to work with this client. All of a sudden, it'll bring it to you. Just make
Mhm.
sure it's there. And I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but it's always worked for me.
No, I don't think it. I'm a firm believer in manifesting, and it also gets me mad when people say they're realistic and they say, "Oh, that's not going to happen because I'm realistic. That's not going to happen." But I'm like, that mindset is closing you off to getting into that opportunity to even get close to that opportunity to grab it. Because sometimes that opportunity might be further away than you think, and you just need to go that extra step to get there. And if you stop that one step, you're not going to get to that path or get to that career or that job, and just because of your mindset.
Oh, or it'll just shut it down. All that
Yeah.
hard work that you worked at, just by saying that one thing, it's done. It's like,
Hmm.
or like I've had these ideas where like I should do this. And I'm like, no, that's not gonna work. And then 2 days later, I'll see somebody on like social media. What a great idea. And I went, oh,
I should have done it. Yeah.
done it. I should have done it.
Yeah.
You
So
know, go
with
ahead.
social media coming into this world of design, I mean, 10, 15 years ago, design social media was a completely different animal. It was really,
Oh,
it wasn't the filters, it wasn't the Photoshop, it was just generic people taking pictures of whatever in their life. And now it's come to that point where it's that perfect, pretty picture. And that is a lot of designers' mindsets where they have to only showcase their pretty pictures, or they're forgetting that they are a person and they're supposed to be relating to that follower or that customer. Have you ever fallen into that kind of that mindset of everything has to be pretty and polished in our world?
yeah. Well, we're a little weirdos. We do everything in 3D. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so everything's put into 3D.
Okay.
So it looks perfect, right? Like we take your home, we put it into 3D, and then we put you into like low poly format so you can walk the whole thing. We can put it in CAD. And you get so used to making it look like, here's how the lighting's going to hit, and this is what it's going to look like. And then the client's like, well, I want to see it perfect. I want to see it in like a super high poly. So like we show it like, and this is the picture. And then they're like, well, it better look like that when it's done. And you're like,
Mm,
oh, most of the time it does, but it's getting to that. I think what our clients don't understand is that stump's going to come broken, like
yeah.
there's going to be a ding, or the piece of wood is so unique that it's going to maybe have a ring here, and it's not going to look just like this high poly, photograph we've made. And they just sit there and like, well, I want to look just like that. And you're like, oh God, I need to backtrack, and I need to teach my clients that this is what we're aiming for. It will be very close to that, but it's it's made out of things that were alive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's gonna have imperfections. Those imperfections are beautiful. Like,
Hmm.
or maybe the color can be a little bit off. It's gonna be okay. But people are just so concerned with it all being like, does this go in Architectural Digest? Well, no, not everything goes in Architectural Digest.
No.
And
Yeah.
actually, I always tell my clients, I just want you to be happy with your home. I don't want your house to look like a circus. Like at the end of the day, I'm more of a guide. You're gonna love this. I had a social media troll go, there's nothing innovative in this photograph you posted. And I was like, thanks. My client loves it. And my client wrote, that's because she did exactly everything I wanted. But do you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it wasn't perfect. It was what my client wanted. But I was hurt. I was like, man, this random troll, somebody on social media telling me that, this is not amazing. I'm like, design doesn't have to be amazing.
No.
It can just be timeless, or it can just be perfect for that client and speak to them. And I think as designers, that's what we're here for. And sometimes we get wrapped up in the moment of everything must be blingy and shiny and perfect. And then your client's like, okay, how do I live in this? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
That's another thing. Living with those, I just talked to, and a couple weeks ago, I had a guest on talk about hate comments, and I always thought hate comments on social media are, it's a positive in my book because it's a positive on
Sure.
my engagement rate. And but I
Right?
think it's so funny because design is such a, it's an art, and it's not something that is a science. Like having, like when I posted a picture of my kitchen, I have a small drawer that I had to put my full on the face frame or the five-piece frame of the door. I couldn't put it in the center panel because of how small it was.
Sure.
And so many people commented on how ugly it was. I'm like, first off, I don't care because this is my kitchen. It doesn't look bad to me. That's the only position you could do it in. But it's a world that we live in that this is not, it's not a science. You could do it in any way possible. That's the awesome thing about design. But I see these even on Architectural Digest. If you read those comments, there's like people
Oh, they're great.
saying some horrible stuff. I'm like, this is all for the client who this job was for. It's not for you.
No,
It,
no.
it's it's so funny that people actually think that their opinion matters on that.
Well, and it's like I kind of like patted myself on the back, like, oh, first troll. Like,
Yeah,
yes,
oh yeah,
you know what I mean?
you
And
made
then
it.
I was like, oh, that was really hateful. Like, wow, okay. And then you were like, but wait a minute. My client called me. He's like, I just saw that troll post. He's like, I love my house. Like, do not worry about that. He's like, and like what you just said, it's not their house. Like
Mm-mm.
my house. And I
Yeah,
think this looks amazing. So he trolled him right back. And I was like, you don't have to do that. But it's so many opinions. I think
yeah,
that's the thing on social media. It's like if you aren't this specific designer and you focus just this trend, right? Like because of my experiences like with Ralph Lauren that we had to do so many different styles. So I'm like, well, what style are you? I can do that. I've done that. I've done super modern, super traditional. Do you want uber glam? Would you like something from 1920s in this specific era? I can do that. And it's like pigeonholing yourself. Do you know
yeah.
what I'm saying? Like,
Hmm.
it's just like, I always urge people don't pigeonhole yourself. Don't say, well, what's your style? Well, what's your style? You came to me to help you work your style out. But if you saw my house, you'd walk in and be like, this looks like the cobbler's shoes because I take the broken pieces of furniture and redo it and put it in my house. So, you
Hmm.
know, but I feel like social media has its pros and then it has its cons.
Yeah,
I have seen some designers get destroyed, like
yeah. Oh
destroyed
yeah.
and not come back out to do their profession because they
Hmm.
got so wound up in this craziness. And like, you have to block that in some way, shape, or form. But I mean, I've
Yeah,
literally watched a top designer who I think is one of the top, I'm not going to name names, but like they're no longer practicing
yeah,
because they had such hateful comments. But their work is worth thousands upon dollars. I mean, if I could hire this person, I would hire this person. Do you know what
hmm,
I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Absolutely.
and I find like, it is art, but there's criticism and then there's massive criticism. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I think we live in a world where more and more people are closed-minded. And when
oh,
you're
for sure.
closed-minded, you're more judgmental. You're only living in your world, and you're not realizing in like in the interior design world that job that designer just posted wasn't for you. It
No.
wasn't for you. It was for the design the customer itself. But I mean I follow designers that always posted finished projects, and they also added some photos of themselves in there, and they're getting judged on the way they look
Oh
when
yeah.
it's a design account, and not being mean about the design but being mean about how the designer actually looks, and it deferred them from not showing themselves in the post. And in my opinion, I love social digital marketing and social media marketing that hurts their brand when they're not showing themselves.
Yeah.
There's no personality to it. So it's such a shame that those comments create them to kind of go away from doing that. And it's just sad that people have to do that.
Well, I would definitely say I've been victim to that. Like I never didn't really show my face. And actually what I've been doing now is I've made a point of it. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna do this.
Mm,
I used to be very thin and then I've had kids and I've gained weight. And like I've not enjoyed seeing myself in a photograph. So that like literally, I grew up in the 90s. So we're like the Victoria's Secret, you know, like you must be this big and what have you. And it's now I'm creating this 40-year-old mindset of, hey, this is my body. This is what I'm in. I'm going to embrace this and I'm going to get out there and I'm going to talk
Yeah.
because I have something to say. But my physical appearance should not dictate me not speaking or being a part of my, you know, my brand or what I'm doing,
Mhm.
because that's why people hire me. They don't hire me because, you know, they hire me because of my work, but they also hire me because of me. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? They connect. And a lot of people do that because they
Mhm.
don't look like HGTV. They don't look like Joanna Gaines, but we got to get over that. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's sad. And it's sad, but those criticisms are so harsh. I mean,
Hmm.
it's like you're putting yourself out there. I mean, like I'm sure on this podcast, someone will be like, troll, you know?
Oh, exactly. They definitely will, especially if I post a reel. I think it's funny. Well, the thing is nowadays, if you're talking to someone that's in an older generation than you, and they have no social media, and and you just said what you just said, and they're like, I didn't used to look like this, and they're like, well, that's just life. But the thing is, the way that we live now on social media, you're posting pictures from decades. So you know, social media started when I was in high school. So there's pictures of me from high school here and then now.
Yeah.
And you start to see the differences. The only time you saw the differences before is if you actually opened up a photo album. And how often did you do that back then?
No, I mean,
Not
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 all.
very often. And you're seeing the social media every day pretty much. Old posts come up, people like old posts. It's just the world we live in, which is the hard part because it affects our mental health.
Oh, for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, I think social media, I always tell it, I'm a skinny, slender, like 40-year-old. So Instagram will stop giving me like Ozempic shot like stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like your
Yeah.
Instagram feed. And I'm like, it will post things you say. So
Yeah.
I've had to be very careful in what like, again, thoughts, things like, stop saying that. Stop putting
Yeah.
yourself down and put yourself out there. What are you afraid of? It's what are you afraid of calling? Well, I was afraid of that. There's me not doing what I'm saying. You know,
Hmm.
and then I really realized like that's a big problem. I literally am lying to myself and I need to just be me and be out there. I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but it's exactly what you're talking about. You know, it's stressful. You get phone
Hmm.
calls from clients at 2 a.m. in the morning and you're not sleeping, or you have the job that everything came broken. Like
Mm,
have
yes.
you been on those?
Oh,
Like,
yes.
you know that client with the worst karma because they're not speaking bad of clients, but you know the client where it's like
Yeah.
they're so like, where's this? Where's that? And you're going, oh God, please, you know it's coming. You open the box and you're like, that's broken. And then you open the next box and you're going, and you're just like, that stress level of crazy. I mean, me with stress, I gain weight. So when you have that one client and you know you get stuck in it because it's like 3 to 4 months to receive product, and you're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
and now I've got to get it to come back. Oh, and that was a custom sofa that took a year.
Another whole year down the drain.
Oh, I mean, but that can affect your mental, you know, your total, I mean, all of that stuff. So then you're
Oh,
sitting
yeah.
there and you're gaining weight, you're this designer, and they're like, well, I saw a picture of you from like 10 years ago, but you don't really quite match that picture now. And you're like, nah, that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Oh, well,
Life goes on.
life goes on.
What I do have a question about your logistics side of the company. How did you go about doing that? Did you like have to get ships? Like what went on with that?
Oh, well, we had to work with you work with a freight forwarder, like a secondary company, and then they basically um, get you the containers to come to our warehouse. So we have a 2 dock
Gotcha.
warehouse. And so then we would basically have to learn 40 foot, 20 foot, 40 foot high, LTLs. You have to speak all that language, you know, like,
Hmm.
and then we had to learn how to pack it. You know, what goes on top, what doesn't go on top. Maybe we shouldn't put the lamp on the bottom, like
Yeah.
that type things. And hand pack. It was like Tetris. It was like, okay, we can fit this here because every cubic foot
Mm,
because that's how they are with containers is, you've got 1,000 feet in a 20-foot container, right?
yeah.
And that could probably fit maybe half a house, right? Maybe a 1,500 square foot house could fit in that. A 40-foot could fit probably 2 to 3 houses in it. And then you could do a 40-foot high, which gives you an extra like few feet, which is what most of the world ships in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then that would give you an extra, like, you could probably do like 3.5 houses. So we had to learn, and then you have to figure out what port, what country takes what container. Like we shipped a 40-foot
Oh
container from
yeah.
them to the wrong size port. That was,
Oh man.
we're like, wait, you only take 20s? We shipped you okay, that's great. We'll be down there. Like we had to fly to the Caribbean and be like, we'll come and get that. Hold on a second. We're gonna unpack this thing at the port and handle that. Yeah, no, we had to learn all of that. And then we had to learn customs officials. Oof, customs is holy moly.
I
Every
bet
country is different. Like you
that
cannot ship rugs to Ecuador. Don't ship a rug to Ecuador. Just don't do it.
uh,
It's not worth it.
that's the whole logistics side of this business interests me because I feel like there's some companies that have it figured out and there's some companies that are been in business for 50 years and still cannot figure it out.
Oh no. I mean, there are some where I'm like, do you just put a forklift through my sofa? How did that happen? Like,
Yeah.
how did you not hit the pallet like and lift? Like, you literally, we had a whole shipment come from a company locally that had forklift through my sofa.
Wow.
This is that same client that everything came broken, and you're just looking at yourself like, that's impressive, and we're not working with you. Um, But yeah, it's incredible. Or like the worst thing is to ship air, right? Like shipping
Hmm.
air is,
Yeah.
especially now that containers are like $35,000 a piece. I mean, back in the day, you're talking like 2 to 3 grand from China. That's why it was so cheap. But now, it's $35,000, $20,000. So your merchandise now became way more expensive. And we had one time they shipped us, half of it was air. And I just called the company and I'm like, you're going to give me half price on this container. You're missing half my product. Like, where is it? Um, and those are the things that we just started to take over ourselves. We would consolidate it ourselves. So we had to create our own, 3PL system, which is not fun. So you're having to learn all of this as an
Hmm.
interior designer. Like, okay, we have to have our BOLs, we have to have our intake, you have to make sure the client signs off, we have to make sure that we have pictures of everything, insurance, where is this going, how's this stacked, what's the temperature of the bonded warehouse in the back, like all of that. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And you're like, if you don't control it, then you're going to have damage.
Yep.
Because if you ship it to someone else's warehouse, they're not going to care for it the same way you do.
No.
And so, like, especially if you're dealing with like Ralph Lauren pieces that are like 50 to $60,000 and you've got a forklift going through it, we have a problem. You have to have select carriers that definitely work with furniture. It's very small, very, very
Hmm.
small. And then going even around the world and shipping it is even smaller. So it's kind of like if you're the client, you're kind of stuck with this. I mean, one of my clients, I remember it wasn't us that shipped it, but someone shipped their furniture with chilies, like hot peppers in the container because it was a consolidated container, right? So
Okay.
their sofas reeked of like hot cayenne chili that you could not get out. Like it baked. Can
Oh
you imagine that? Like,
my gosh.
you opened it and you were like ruined. I mean, all the merch
Yeah.
ruined. It's nuts. I mean, there are stories that you just go, I can't believe that just happened. Oh, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
See, I never really dealt with that, the logistics side of that. Most I did is like cabinets kind of coming from a cap factory,
sure.
but I worked at a commercial design firm over COVID, and we did lose a lot of freights in the ocean, which was kind of
Oh,
funny.
yeah. Was
Like,
from Europe?
yep,
We
just
had oh yeah.
they're just
From
floating down there.
I think we had a container worth of like pillows going to Russia that ended up in the very bottom of the sea that I'm like, I hope you had insurance.
Yeah, I've always wondered like how much stuff is in the ocean just from just product like that are just coming over from overseas.
Oh, I'm sure there's thousands. I'm sure containers just get lost. I mean, we're hitting bridges left and right now with container ships. I mean, what do you think's happening over there?
Yeah, seriously, in the big open sea, they could cover it up more.
Oh my gosh. Or like, we've dealt with, you can have container clips cut off and half your stuff's missing. And then they put the clip back on and you're like, oh, nothing happened. And you're like, no, I have exit photos. Like that was,
Yeah,
where's my stuff? I mean, it's insane. I mean, you have if to be in this business, I think you have to laugh. I think you have
yeah,
to go, you don't know. Like you hope it makes it there.
yeah. I've heard so many stories about like the pirates too. Like
Oh, yeah.
like that stuff is crazy that even exists, and then people don't think that that is going to affect the product that you're buying just for your house. Like, who would have thought?
Oh, I mean, so at Ralph, when we were in Mexico, we would ship the container to Laredo, and then they would have to pay for a police escort from the top of Laredo, Texas, down to Mexico City for a furniture container so that they wouldn't get stolen along the way. Like, that's nuts. That was part of doing business. Like, so the obviously the price of your furniture just went up because you're paying for the police to make sure your furniture get to your
Yeah,
door.
who would
What?
have thought? Like,
you know,
yeah,
but that's typical. I
yeah,
mean, you'd have to have an escort even to job sites. We would have to have escorts sometimes to job sites. I mean, we're going in certain people's houses. Like, we had to make sure we had someone guarding the container, who's guarding going in, background checks on who can come in.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Especially
and
when they find out that you're putting a crystal chandelier in houses and these high-end stuff.
oh my God. Well, especially when they see a crane going over the house and you're like,
Oh,
cat's out of the bag, and everybody's watching you and you're going, oh, this isn't going to be good. Like,
mm,
and you're like, oh, this will be interesting. But yeah, we've airlifted those things or putting sofas up on a 45th floor in Mexico City and
yeah.
everybody's watching this huge sofa go up and you're going, this could end very badly. This could be great publicity or very bad publicity.
Uh, well, Colleen, I do really appreciate you making that time to come out on this podcast. It was a great podcast. I love talking about I didn't even think we would talk about logistics, but it was something that really does affect our business a lot, and I'm glad we did talk about it.
Well, I am too, and thanks for having me on and enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, and I always say to my guests, if you want to come back on, let me know. I'm always willing to jump on a call. Maybe one day do one in person.
Would love to. Whenever
Yeah.
you're in here, please. We'd love to have you come down.
Yeah. Well, let's finish off on where people could follow you and where people could
Sure,
find you on your website.
sure. So you can find me at CBB Design Firm. And same thing for Instagram at CBB Design Firm. You'll be able to see that. Our other companies are Morgan Stewart Logistics, Catechus Folium, View Couture. And yeah, that's who we are.
Awesome. Well, Colleen, I'll also put these in the description of the podcast in the um, description of the social media post as well, so it's easier for people to find. But thank you so much for hopping on the Pro Series podcast today.
Well, thank you again.